leader, business advisor, and supply chain expert. And good morning, my Moodies, and welcome back to my podcast, The Morning Mood. We are back with the great, amazing, just fantastic Alicia. And she is here to talk to us again about a little deeper, and we're going to get into our inner edge conversations. And today we are talking about confidence. And Alicia's got a pretty interesting perspective on this.
Right.
Welcome.
Hey, I'm so glad to be back and to have this
Yeah.
conversation with you. And yes, confidence is a really big thing. But I specifically today, I want to talk about why leaders don't have to feel like they always have to show up as confident, that they always have to show up as knowing, all the answers or having all the answers, and how
Yes.
actually being a little more transparent about that can help build better communication, more trust, and actually give the people that work for leaders a chance to show up with their own
Yep.
brilliance.
Yes. Yes. So let's talk about the confidence piece of that because there's a big perception that, to be a leader, you have to have high confidence. And we get all these kind of like weird coaching, right? Like stand tall, put your hands on your hips, raise your chair higher than other people, sit at the head of the table. Like all these like stupid little confidence builders, right? That are out there that are sort of external and I consider them somewhat superficial. So let's talk about like being confident.
I would add that those kinds of things are not about confidence; they're about dominance.
Oh, interesting. Let's parse that apart for a couple minutes because that's a very interesting point. Yes, tell me more.
So, and we don't really notice our bodies and the way we relate to physically. So, we all have a sensation if I'm sitting down and someone is standing over me, how am I going to feel? I'm not going to feel
Small.
very empowered. I'm going to feel small. So, this kind of like putting your chair up higher and things like that. And I'm not. There are times where standing up isn't so much about
Yeah.
confidence or dominance. It especially for women, and if the woman is petite, like I've
Yes.
actually coached women to stand up if they're trying to make a point and they're not being heard in a meeting, stand up.
Yeah.
And not only
Yeah.
stand up and walk around because
Yeah.
then everybody's eyes are going to
Poker face.
follow her and that's where the attention is. And sometimes,
Yeah.
especially if they're soft spoken or if they're physically petite, um,
Hmm.
and they're not being listened to, that's the only way to get their attention.
Yeah.
So
And I'm a petite woman. You guys only see me from like here up, but I'm like 5'5". I'm kind of small. And I've run into this issue where I've had to get extra loud is what I do. To to
cut through.
To take up space, basically, to be like, "Hey, no, wait a minute. Like, just because I'm little doesn't mean I'm not powerful."
Right. And so,
Yeah.
so I have a little, I'm going to be telling like three stories today that I just,
Yay.
I love story. So this story is also about that kind of positioning, the power positioning, which really is about dominance. Um,
Yeah.
and it's a very personal story, something that happened to me, and how I was able to shift it. Many years ago, when I was still living in Boston, I was hired by the board of directors to coach a CEO. Now, when a board of directors hires you as a coach for their CEO, there's big
There's a
trouble
problem.
here. Like this is not going to be easy.
As someone who's been inserted at the executive level for similar reasons, it's never pleasant.
It's not going to be fun. And so I went in, and it was this. I went in for my first meeting with this person. Let's call him Joe. It's a name. And so I went in for this first meeting with Joe. First of all, he made me wait outside for like a half hour. Okay,
Oh, uh-uh.
right. Then, and I was a relatively new coach. I think I'd been coaching 2.5 years or something like that. Something like that.
You were good new. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is, relatively new, right? 2.5 years. So
Yeah.
I go in, and I had been coaching CEOs before. It's not that the CEO coaching was, it's just like I was kind of, not in my
No, just to pause right here for a second, because before you became a coach, you were in HR,
No,
correct?
no. I was
Nope. Okay.
I had my own business, but I did training for the hospitality
Training, that's
industry.
what it was, yes. Okay,
Yeah,
got it,
I did
right. So
meeting
you weren't
planning and
new
training.
to yeah, you weren't new to working with executives and things like
No,
that. I just wanna call that out. Yeah, yeah,
no,
yeah. You
and
weren't like 2 and a half
no,
years fresh out of college.
no, 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 and, indeed, like, I ran my own company, so I was often
Yes.
working with the CE level, for, agreements
Yeah,
and things like that. So,
yeah,
so I did finally go in, and it was a very, masculine office. It was these big, leather chairs and seats,
yeah.
and then his was he had this beautiful, window behind him, like, to look at the city, and, he was sitting behind the biggest desk I've ever seen, and he was a big man, he was just like a big man, right? And
Mhm.
so I walk in, and I'm trying to control my own emotions because I'm feeling intimidated. Like, and I know
Yeah.
I am, but I have an awareness of it. He doesn't even look up when I walk in the room. Doesn't even look up. Finally, he says, "Sit there." And I sit in the one of these armchairs in front of his desk that makes me like down here and he's like up here behind this giant
Yes.
desk. And so I realize that this is what he's doing. But what he said to me next, uh, God honest truth. He said to me, finally looked up and he said, "So what does a little girl like you have to teach me?"
Well well, first of all, it'd be manners.
And I remember thinking, whatever comes out of my mouth right now is going to determine how this goes.
Is gonna set the tone for
Everything.
everything.
And then I just took a deep breath. I leaned back, took my time, and I said, I don't really know, but you all are paying me $500 an hour, and I can sit here and as long as you'd like.
"You can
And
do my nails, it's okay."
I'll sit here as long as you like. And so, like, he didn't flinch. And then he says, "Well, tell me about what you do." So fine. Like 2
Yeah.
months later, I had now developed a relationship with him, and I came into the session, and, he said, "I owe you an apology." And I said,
Wow.
"What for?" And he says, "Remember the first day?" I said, "Yeah, kinda unforgettable." And he says, "I want you to understand why I did that." And I was like, "Okay." And he said, "You have to understand, I am surrounded by people who say yes to me all the time. No one says no. No one challenges me." He says, "And I need to know that the person that you was the person that was going to challenge me and say, 'No, you're wrong.'"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so this goes the reason I share this story, and by the way, he became one of my favorite clients. We would have these amazing conversations and he also allowed himself to be as vulnerable as I think he could ever get. Um,
Yep.
and that actually not only changed him, but like months later, I would come in and people were like, "Oh, thank God you're here." We're like, "Oh my God, we've seen such a
Cold
change
relief.
in him." Right. But
Oh.
the reason I bring this up has to do with this idea of I don't have to have all the answers. Right. And so he was one of these people that, needed to have someone say, Joe, I think there's another way of looking at this because he felt all the pressure on him and he wasn't, like when they say it's lonely at the top, in many cases, yeah, it
It is.
is. And he also wasn't inviting
Right.
challenge. He wasn't
Yeah.
inviting different perspectives. He kind of expected a senior team would step up. But I said, the
Would
way
do it
you
anyway.
yeah, but I said you shut them down. So why would you expect that? And
Yeah, exactly.
vulnerability was a new thing for him. He's like, "Well, so I can say I don't know." I said, "Yes." And
Yeah.
that was like a big insight for him. It's like, "Well, I'm the CEO. I'm supposed to know." I'm like, "No, you don't. Your
Mm-mm.
role is to have the people around you that can show you
Who knows?
something that you don't see and that you
Mhm.
don't know, and to offer alternatives so that you can make a good decision, on
Yep.
what the direction is and get buy-in and support from your team. And
Yes. It works
unbelievable.
a lot better that way.
It does. And so unbelievably, even though he had been CEO for a long time, this is an older man. At the time, he was in his
Mhm.
late 50s.
Yeah.
And it was one of the things that I always think about is, how many CEOs have said to me, aren't I supposed to have all the answers? Aren't I supposed to know? And
Yeah.
and no, you don't, because if you take that stance, you're going to limit your own imagination, but you're also going to
Oh,
limit
yeah.
the ability to tap into the talent, the knowledge, the expertise, the alternative visions and perspectives of the people around you that may provide you a completely different solution that works better than what you thought.
Yep.
Right.
It happens all the time.
Right.
And I see it a lot where I see it a lot in startups
Yeah.
where the founder has I know-itis
I know itis.
and the company plateau. They get they you see it, they're like they ramp up, they're like on fire for like 4 or 5 years and then poof, and then
Burnout.
they hang right here. And they hang and they might bump up 10 or 20%, but they don't go anywhere. And it's just always because their leader has I know-itis and they
Yeah.
won't listen.
Yeah. And
And they're
they
like,
don't
"But I
listen.
started this company, so I should know everything." I'm like, "You knew everything 5 years ago. You don't know what's going on today."
Right. So there's a
Yeah.
really difference. So there's an arrogance piece
Yes.
here, but there's also another piece. So the arrogance piece is I know itis. I love that.
I
That's the arrogance.
Yep.
But the other piece that I see with women leaders is if I
Mhm.
don't know everything, I'm weak. It's a
Yeah.
different conversation with women.
That's a different conversation.
That's a
And
different
it's
conversation.
true. It is true, and I hate to admit it, I have avoided admitting this my whole life, um, because I always felt and I always worked and tried to present myself in a way that I was not gender neutral because obviously I'm a woman, I have huge titties if you've never seen them, I can't hide them, and they've been the focus of a lot of attention, like, I'm not gonna lie about it, but so I can't say that I went in being gender neutral, but I feel like I tried to have neutral energy is what it was trying to be, and then sometimes I had to show up a little bit extra masculine to make something happen.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, but
Right.
there's a difference. The things that you are parsing out are really interesting. This is why I'm so excited to have you on this podcast is because we can get really deep. Like so far we've talked about dominance, confidence, arrogance,
Power.
their power. None of those are confidence. Those
No.
are things that look like confidence.
Right. And that's why it's
Yeah.
so important to to have a distinction about it. And there's an element of like uh humility or lack of humility, right?
Yeah.
You have to have some humility to say, I don't have the answer to this, but I think I know where I can find it. Or I think, let me throw it to, X, Y, and Z group or people in my organization and see what they come up with. So that
Right.
you have to have an element of humility to say, I actually don't know. I'm
Yeah.
not clear on that. Right.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's okay. Like, and it's
and it's a
in my experience,
strength. It's a strength,
yes,
not a
it is
weakness.
such a strength. It is such a strength. And the other thing is that it's such a weight off your shoulders when you can finally do it and be like, and the thing is, and this is what I tell when I coach people, in my consulting business too, is the thing is you can say, I don't know, but you got to go get the answer. Like that's the other piece of it. Like you don't get to just say, I don't know.
Yeah. So are you ready for my
Yeah.
next story?
Yeah.
Um, so I had a CEO come work with me on a retreat. And part of it was he was actually a social entrepreneur and he was really burnt out. That's a lot of reason why people like that come to work here in Portugal. And I had taken him for a walk on the beach, which is like
Mhm.
I have a very unusual way of doing my work here.
Oh, yeah,
And
and the beaches there are gorgeous,
I
by the
know
way,
you
like,
know because
why
you've
would
been
you
here.
ever, like, always be on the beach? Yeah, love it.
And it was kind of close to it, like wasn't sunset, but it was like the end of the day, and I was looking out over the ocean with him. We were on the just you know there were like little boats. It was a beautiful scene. And I asked him to tell me how far he could see. How far can you see? And he said, to the horizon. I said, does just everything end at the horizon? And he's like, no, of course not. I said, okay, well, then tell me what's on the other side of the horizon. And he looked at me like, that's a kind of weird question. I can't see beyond the horizon. I said, okay, you see that
Mhm.
boat over there, like the blue boat, which
Mhm.
is like out pretty far. And he said, yeah. I said, do you think he can see beyond what you can see? And he said, yeah, because he's closer. He's like further away from where I'm standing and he's closer to like the other edge. And I said, that's right. I said, so that the idea isn't that you're supposed to know what's on the other side of this. You don't have to know everything. The idea is that there are people just like that blue boat that are closer or have a different perspective or are looking at it from a different angle, an angle that you
Mhm.
don't have available to you.
Yes.
I said, so that the idea is, where are your boats? Who are your people?
Yeah.
What are their
Who are your
talents?
people?
Why are you
Yeah.
enlisting them instead of like putting it all on your shoulders? No wonder you're tired. You know?
It's true, and you bring up another very interesting point, and a word that you said there is that he didn't have the capability. He didn't have
No,
he was not able to see the other perspective. In the I can't remember exactly the way you said it, but it was important. Because
the yeah, the capacity to see beyond.
capacity, that's what it was, capacity. And it's very important because a lot of times we throw ourselves into this negative cycle, like, "I should have known that."
Yeah.
Right? Oh, damn, I should have known that. I really should have known that. I mean, I'm very famous for that. That's my one of my favorite reel is that I should have known it real. And so there's a but the difference I want to pull out for the people who are listening, my audience and my moodies is that it's about capacity. It's not that you were incapable. It's none of that. You didn't have the capacity because you had ever neither been exposed to it, didn't know about it, or just didn't see it from a different point of view. But it's not about a deficiency.
No, it's not about a deficiency. It's like if you're the head of an engineering firm, do you have to know every little minute thing about engineering? No, you don't. You might have to have a framework for it, but you don't have to know absolutely every little thing. That's why you have other engineers working for you.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
and so the idea, I think a piece of this also is that, for leaders, when I work with them, is to first define what is your actual role. What is your leadership role in the
Mm.
organization? So I
Mhm.
do the 2 column thing. Okay. These are the things that only you can do. And these are all the other
Yes.
things. And these things belong to
Yes.
somebody else. And you have to find people who can
Yes.
do that or be that are better than you at that.
Yeah.
So that you can
Yes.
stay within your role, which is the vision, the direction, the strategy, the networking in some cases. But, like, I
Yep.
think you don't, and especially if you take that jump from, like, management to leadership, it's
Yeah.
different.
And there's a difference.
Management is much more about, doing and getting tasks done
Tactical.
and
Yeah.
more tactical. But leadership is about managing relationships, about ideas, about vision, about direction, about strategy, about imagination. And
Yep.
and and it's hard to for many people, it's hard to make that leap because first of all, they haven't really defined their role as a leader and what that entails and more importantly, what it doesn't entail. So a lot of leaders don't want to delegate. Well, they don't want to delegate because they don't trust their people to do what they need it done. So
Right.
again, this is like, you have to hire, people who know what they're doing. I mean,
Yeah.
you cannot really stress that enough. You either mentor them or hire them and let them do their job because you hired them because they were good. And then
Yeah.
like there's dialogue, there's conversation. You're still the one who makes the decision. You still, give the direction so that they know, okay, for the sake of what am I doing this, right? But other than that, you don't need to have every single answer.
Agreed. That's a great one. So great story, Alicia, about having people around you. And again, focusing on it's really around capacity. It's not around a deficiency within you. So
Well,
don't take that
it's around capacity, but also defining your role. Being very
defining your role.
yeah, being very,
Yeah.
very clear on what does belong to you and what doesn't belong to you,
Doesn't.
and
Yeah.
then for the column that has, like, does not belong to you, having people who are the best people at that so that you can delegate and you can focus on what the elements of your role are.
Yes.
Which means
Right.
you don't have to know everything, but you have to facilitate the,
Yeah.
the intelligence that's in the organization, or in your team. That's
Yeah.
really
You
part
have
of your
to
role.
lead them. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you still have to lead them, like, that's the
Yeah.
point, and the leader sets the direction, "This is the direction we're going in, this is what's important, this is what's not important," like, those are the things, but you're not getting down into more of the tactical details that you should be delegating to someone else.
Right, because you
Alright,
won't
when
be
we
able to
started
lead.
you yeah, you exactly, you won't be able to lead, and that's when I talk about companies, startups that then plateau, because they're not leading anymore, they're
Right.
doing,
They're doing.
and they don't wanna give up control for whatever reason that they've got some hang up about that. But you mentioned that you had 3 stories when we started. Do you have another one for us?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So, I was also coaching a CEO once, in Boston, and his building was for anybody who's been in Boston, there's a beautiful it's called Boston Gardens. It's in, like, the center of Boston, and his building was, like, the high building. And, when I walked into his office, this is one of my favorite, clients a long time ago. I walked into his office and he was standing at one of those floor to ceiling glass windows, in his
Mhm.
office. And I could sense he was really quiet. And, and I walked in and I just said, "Hey, is everything okay?" And he said, "Could you come here for a minute?" I was like, I'm afraid of heights. So I was like, "Oh my God." So I walked towards the glass and he says to me, and we're over the Boston Garden, and he says to me, "What do you see?" And I was like, "Trees." That's what I saw. It was like, it's the Boston Garden. I can see the tops of trees. He says, "Yeah, me too." And he just got really quiet. And I was like thinking, what does he mean? And he says, "That's what I've noticed." He says, "I only see like the top part of my organization. I actually have no idea what's going on inside my organization." Oh my God. It was like this huge revelation. And I said, "How did you come to that?" He goes, "I was just literally standing here looking at the trees and thinking, that's like me. I only see the tops of trees and I don't actually know what's going on beyond what I can
Underneath
see."
the tops.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like he says, "So if I go like 3 levels down in my organization, I don't know what the managers are doing." He says, "And I don't know that it's actually working well." And I said, "Well, have you ever had that conversation with your team?" And he goes, "No, because I didn't realize it." so, so the interesting thing about, again, confidence and leading and stuff, and this is why I said, he realized that he wasn't actually accessing the knowledge and the talent within his organization because he was only going down like one level.
Level.
And one
Yeah.
of the things he ended up doing is, like, for a week, he would spend some amount of time in different areas in his organization, just literally talking to people and saying, "How can I make your life better?"
What's
And
going on?
yeah, what's going on? Where are some of the challenges that how are we what are we doing that's working well? And what are we doing that we could improve? And he was just so authentic and so, real about it. And so again, I'm going back to the humility word. And
Humble.
he gathered so much information, and he said, "I had no idea that people were feeling this way. I had no idea that these things were happening in my organization."
Yeah.
And
Yes.
he then started, like, working with his team to implement, like, best practices and a whole bunch of different changes. But
Yeah.
that's a story that always stayed with me because it took a lot of courage for him to say, "I actually don't know."
I don't know what they do. And I will tell you some of the best leaders I have ever worked with, and it's probably 3. were that type of leader where they were involved in 2 or 3 levels down in what was going on. They had their finger on the pulse. They weren't afraid to get in and get dirty. And they were the best leaders because they truly understood the struggle and what was happening and what you were trying to achieve. Versus the other leaders who are a little bit too shiny and pristine, who only wanted to talk to their direct reports, were generally kind of out of touch, and I would say overall kinda less successful.
Yeah, and I think it's also out of touch not only with the people in the organization, but as a result, you're out of touch with your customers. 'Cause it's
Yes,
the
very
people in the
true.
organization that actually that are working, directly with
Work with the
customers and
customer.
clients, and they're getting the feedback, but they have nowhere to go with that feedback.
Yeah,
So,
that's a really good point.
yeah, it extends beyond just the employees.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Well, as always, Alicia, a wonderful conversation with you to go deep on confidence and just to remind you guys that it is not about power, dominance. What was the other word we used? I
I
can't remember what it
forgot.
was. Power, dominance, and something else. It's not about any of those things. Confidence is really about being confident enough to say you don't know.
Yeah, or how am I
Yeah.
wrong? That's
How
another
am I
one.
wrong?
How that's
What did I miss?
yeah, what did I
Yeah.
miss? Yeah,
What did I miss? How about what did I miss? That's the one I use. I use that a lot. Like, what did I miss? What am I missing?
yeah,
For me, that feels better to ask that. I don't know. Everybody's got their way of asking it.
right,
So thank
exactly.
you, Alicia,
Alright,
for coming and sharing your excellent expertise. And we will be back with you again soon. And to my Moody's, have a great day. And
alright.
don't be arrogant.